over the hill at the Haslemere Educational Museum in Haslemere, Surrey. And this is my exhibition, Over the Hill, a photographic journey. The first picture is Yes It Is by Howard Orson, who's a friend of mine, and he came to photograph me with my Beatles collection, and he decided to put me on the floor and just cover me with all my Beatles stuff, photograph me from above. And I called it Yes It Is because that's one of my favourite songs, beautiful harmonies, wonderful John Lennon voice, and it means so much to me, the Beatles. And so it was perfect for him to photograph me because he loves the Beatles too. This is called The Red Ball by Heather Buckley down in Brighton. We went on the pier and tried different shots, but then I started playing this game and I still don't know whether I won or not, but I kept throwing the red ball and she bunged her camera in front of me as I kept throwing the red ball, and it came out beautifully. I thought it was just such a great picture. So dynamic. This is called Oblivion by Josie Ainscoe, who's a young student, and she decided to film me with a necklace of fire. The candles were much taller, but they kept falling off and dropping into my lap, so we thought we better cut them back, so we cut them back a bit, and I leaned against the wall so that the necklace stayed away from my skin. But I think it's a great photograph. I look very tranquil and quiet and calm amongst all this fire, which is sort of a bit like having Parkinson's disease. This one's called I by a friend of mine called Abigail, and she's a fantastic photographer, and she really wants to concentrate on my eyes, and I just love this picture because it says so much about her and me. And as I said, living is easy with eyes closed, misunderstanding all you see. It's another Beatles line, but great photograph taken at Horsham. This is Cocoon by Yagna. She played about with this in post-production, but basically she wrapped me up in gauze and I was shaking like mad because I was all restricted. And I sat on the settee, so it looks like I'm shorter than I am. And she put all this around it. And that little shaft of light there came in through the window and reflected against the back curtain. So that's called Cocoon. This one is Over the Hill by Roberto Fodai. Roberto was found by Jane, and I contacted him, and he came along, we met, and I decided to call my project Over the Hill, but I hadn't told anybody, not even Roberto. And he said he got 2 hats he wanted me to wear for the shoot the following week. He showed me one, and then he said, "There's another hat," and it's got a rather ironic message on the front, and it had Over the Hill on the front, and it was just amazing because he didn't know that my project had been called Over the Hill. This picture is based on a painting by Van Dyck of Charles I, showing 3 faces of Charles I. It was taken by a friend of mine, former partner Richard Brimacombe, and I'm his friend in the middle, I'm the solicitor on the left, and I'm the actor on the right. This was taken up in Preston by Jill Jennings, sorry, not Preston, Stockport, and she wanted it to be like a Pumpkinhead, a Magritte painting, and so we went out. It poured with rain a few minutes before that, and then suddenly the sky all cleared, and I became Mr. Pumpkinhead. This is a great photograph by Linda Lieberman, who's the most charming person. She hung 2 fish around my neck, and whenever she changed the film, she kept taking the fish away. But after a while, I got quite attached to them, so I said, no, leave them there. But it's all to do with ecology and protecting our fish stocks. Much too complicated for me. This one is called Holding On by Patrizia Burra. She's a person I found on Flickr, and she lives in Italy. And she was so excited about my project, she got on the plane and came over to England to photograph me with her husband. And I just love this picture. It's just, I love the look on my face and the light that she's got, and it looks so romantic and innocent and ethereal. This one is by a friend of mine called Jeremy Morley, and it wasn't the picture he would have chosen, but I like it because it reminded me of a story my mother told of her father who wanted to be taken out of the church in his coffin feet first, so I called it Feet First. I'm not dead yet though. This one was by Travis Hodges. I met him down in Brighton and he asked me to talk at a thing called Photo Forum up in London, but before we did that he took my photograph with this reflection of some dappled, some water on a screen through a projector. I think it looks so strong and clear. This one I loved. It's Julia Zacchetti. She's a young student who graduated last year, and her degree show was absolutely brilliant. She had about 20 pictures and they were all so different but all brilliant, and she's got a great career ahead of her. But she wanted to photograph me becoming free from my suit and having colour and pizzazz and everything going on. That looks wonderful. This is a photograph by an old client of mine who I acted for years ago when I was working in Haslemere, which is where we are now. And his name is Anthony Hatley, and we met at a retirement do, and he told me he was now a photographer. And he came up to Brighton and took that photograph, and you can just see James painting in the background, and I called it Half Fool, because that painting had a certain meaning to it, and I didn't know what it meant until eventually the penny dropped after about 18 months after Jamie painted it. So a Half Fool is a sort of play on words. This is an excellent photograph. It's by a chap called Tim Andrews. It's a self-portrait. We stayed when we moved from Ravenswood in Milford, we stayed at a house in Colgate near Horsham. And it had this huge garden and fields overlooking it. Every morning I went out to play at about 6 o'clock in the morning and did some self-portraiture. And this day I just jumped up and down in front of the camera with the sun behind me. And this one just happened to be right, with the light came through my legs, but it wasn't intended, it was just pure luck. And I cut my head off, because if I kept my head, it would have looked a bit ridiculous, because I had a bit of a funny expression on my face. This is by a young photographer called Haslemere, who had lots of ill health and problems arising from it, but she was very keen to photograph me. And she wanted to photograph me in a sort of religious sense, and she wanted me to hold something very precious whilst I was making this religious sort of sign with my hand. And this is the thing I'm holding is my appointment as a solicitor signed by the Master of the Rolls, Lord Denning, and in 1977. And I called it Who Was He? There's a long story behind that, but it was based on something Lord Denning said when he came to the university to speak to the students. I went up to Edinburgh twice and had some great times up there. And I met this chap called Lawrence Winran, who I'd seen in a book, Altered Images, and he did these wonderfully surreal cone men, and he plays a lot on Photoshop and post-production, and he wanted me to come across as a latter-day philosopher. So he stuck me on a little plinth, and a lot of this was put in afterwards. Not all of it, but some of it. And Lawrence is the most warm-hearted individual. He gives you a big hug every time you see him. And he got so excited it took his breath away when he was photographing me. This is a photograph by my son, Tom, and he's got a great eye for photography, and he photographed me in the pub. And this is his photograph of my hand, and there's nothing nicer than having a pint of beer in a pub, and certainly nothing nicer than having a pint of beer in a pub with your son. This photograph was taken by Erin O'Connor, a photographer down in Brighton. It was she's a very sort of quiet person, quite shy, but when she came into the studio, I met her in the studio, she'd done her hair differently. She was so confident, she knew exactly what she wanted, and she had an assistant called, I can't remember his name now, but he threw the sheet of silk across as I stretched it out, and I call that the 6th position, because I'm sure it's not a bad position, but I think there are 5 positions, and that's the 6th one I made up. This photograph was taken by Astrid. She wanted to know what interested me when I was younger, what what made me the way I was now. And I told her I loved westerns, and so she said she would photograph me like John Wayne. And I told her I collected all the cinema tickets that I got over the years. So she made me a hat with all the cinema tickets plastered on it, and I've still got the hat. That's a great picture. It's called Wanting to Know. And this is another cowboy picture by Katerina Ivanovich, and it was taken in the Devil's Punch Bowl. It's in Devil's Dyke in Brighton. But I told her how much I liked cowboys here, and it's got such a romantic feel about it. I just love that picture. And the title's called There Was a Time, and that comes from a line in The Magnificent Seven where Robert Vaughan tries to catch 3 flies, and he opens his hand, he's only got one. He says there was a time, and I used to get all 3. Great film. This is called Over the Hill, again by Brian David Stevens. He wanted me to write out phrases and words that meant something to me. So I did lots of different phrases and words, and one of them was Over the Hill because it was the name of the project. And then he wanted to photograph me after I looked at these words, and he wanted me to think about the words as he was photographing me. And as I turned this piece of paper over and saw Over the Hill, and I looked at him, and I just burst into tears because I don't know why, but afterwards I realised it was the only phrase which connected me with him, because it was part of my project. And I didn't really want to put this into the project because I thought it was a bit too obvious, you know, too over the top, but he was very keen that I did, and I think it's the right thing that I should have done. This is called The Cup of Enchantment by Reuben Wu. We went down to Wittering, and he wanted me to be photographed on a little rock to make it look as if I was on a mountain, and he was going to manipulate the images, but this was all taken by Polaroid, and it was the most foul day. The rain was coming in at right angles, the wind was blowing all over the place, and every so often he would take the Polaroids and pin them to his leg and compare them to make sure he got the right shots. But these are all those little sort of breakwater bits of wood, and he put me in the middle of it, and it's just a great picture. This is called Naked with Kimono and Balloon, because I'm not wearing anything underneath the kimono. It's by Poppy French, and she's a woman from Haslemere. And she was with her friend called James Barnett. And we had such fun that day. We were like 3 kids going out to play. And the only thing we had to make sure was that we had to stop in time for Doctor Who. And we did. And we did lots of stupid things that day, and I laughed so much. It was great fun. This one's called Mad Hatter by Candy Ackland, who's Joss Ackland's granddaughter. And this was the second shoot I did with her. We went up into the hills in Brighton and climbed over a fence into a rape field, and I put on this tailcoat, and that's my grandfather sat there. I wasn't wearing anything else. She made me up, and the commuters were driving past thinking, what the hell is going on here? But it's a great shot. I like that. This is by a young girl. She's only 23, and she's so businesslike. She's got everything, her head really screwed on properly with regard to her photography business. And it's called Shit Happens, and it does. And she put the pigeon on my head. It wasn't there in the first place, but it's quite an amusing photograph. She's a little ball of energy. She's a very nice woman. This one's called Snap by Clayton Bastiani, taken on the Isle of Wight, which is called the Dinosaur Isle, so they find the dinosaurs there. He wasn't there at the time, it's been put in afterwards. But I love the way I'm reacting to the camera. And the dinosaur is either laughing or he's just about to pick me up and push me out of the way so he can be photographed, I don't know. But it's a great picture, I love it. And Clayton's a very nice guy. This is called Beautiful Decay by Danielle Tunstall. When I met her, she'd only been using camera for a couple of years. She had no equipment apart from a reflector and this camera. And she asked me to hold some flowers, and she put the makeup on my face. And I just leaned back and smiled. And she did all the rest on the computer, which she'd only also been using for the last 2 years. So she's an amazingly talented young person, and it's a brilliant photograph, very energetic. This is the last one is by, well, not the last one, Rob Hudson. He does landscape photography, and I loved his landscapes, and he said, come into the trees and I'll photograph you in the trees. So I'm in there somewhere, you can just see my eyes and my mouth. So I'm all part of the tree, and it was a great shoot. He's a very intelligent guy, but very easy to get on with, quite a quiet sort of person. It was great shoot. And two other small ones. This is called My Name Is ... by Haslemere. And the words come from my Zorro films, where I say my name is Antonio Banderas, known to many as Zorro, defender of the people, protector of freedom. And he wanted to take a fun picture, so
Don't fall down that hole, so you're feeling.
well, it's very odd coming back here so long after starting my legal career here in 1977. But there'll be lots of different people here from different parts of my life, and that will be interesting.
And it's rather nice, I think, to have you back in Haslemere, so to speak.
I think it's a wonderful exhibition, Tim. I'm really impressed about the quality and the content. Reading the labels that go with the pictures is just fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I love the diversity in the pictures as well. I love the colour and black and white. I think you've done a marvellous project, and we at the museum are delighted to have it here and showing it. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Haslemere Museum. And it's not our evening, it's Tim and Jane's evening with his photographs over the hill. Normally when you do these little things, you go onto the internet and check out a few details. It's a bit tricky when you've known him for over 30 years. In fact, I'm slightly worried that I haven't actually made any notes. Tim reminds me slightly of Clark, what was his name?
Gable?
Clark Kent. Without the underpants and without the telephone booth. There he was, a callow youth when I first met him. Shining, on a slippery ladder, making his way up as a lawyer. He was with Berlin-Geach, McPherson, Berlin-Geach, senior partner, MCC. We did what, I was in property, we did what you did in those days professional. We had went out for a drink, we went to cricket, we went to the pub, we went to rugby, we went to the pub, we had a drinks drink, we went to the pub. It was the sort of things that you really did in those days.
I did some conveyancing.
I forgot to mention that he was also doing some conveyancing and that sort of thing. So you can imagine, establishment figure. Okay, there he is, member of MCC, probably the worst bowler I've ever come across, but we'll pass on that one. But member of the establishment, he then gets ill. We all think, oh, this is dreadful, this is probably the end of it, you know, he's retiring. Instead of that, he comes out of that booth, and he's another person. The alter ego appears. He becomes his own art installation. He sits up on the plinth in Trafalgar Square. He decides that he's going to take photographs every day for a year. He decides he's going to write to everybody, the Queen, Prince Charles, the Pope. Do you know what? Much to my amazement, they write back. So he moves on, and then somewhere along the line, which he's probably told me at a cricket match and I've forgotten, he got involved with the photographers. And as a result of that, the photographers, I think it was Tim's idea, but the photographers were so keen to do something different. And what we've got here is really an expression of actually freedom. And I hate to say this to any erstwhile partners, but he just leapt away from being a lawyer into this person of art. And whereas sometimes one might feel sorry that he's got Parkinson's, I think quite the opposite. It's been a complete revelation. I think he's had an absolutely wonderful time. I won't go into all the stories I thought of. I'll just give one sensible view, which was actually which had nothing to do with me at all, which was because he's also appeared in films. And you'll find, if you go on, you must go on YouTube and look for Budden Phil. I like Budden Phil, particularly early Budden Phil. Go on YouTube and look for it. But anyway, I had a film made about him, and the film chap said, "This film offers a symbolic exploration of Tim's identity, sharing his vulnerability, humanity, transformation and eventual liberation, part of his process of a philosophical approach to Parkinson's disease. Tim expresses and in his own way liberates himself from the pressures that come with being a grown-up." Well, I'm not going to talk about that when we go to cricket, obviously, but I think it probably does explain exactly where he is. Tim.
Aww.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to say a few words. Thanks very much, all of you, for coming. It means a lot to me, and it's very interesting coming back to Haslemere since I was first here in 1977 when I started my legal career, all those years ago. And it's nice to see some familiar faces from those times. And I'd like to thank Alan very much for suggesting that I exhibit here in the first place. And to all the people at Haslemere Museum, Karen, Julia, and John Belton particularly for putting up the show. And all the photographers, some of whom are here tonight, and Jane for all her support and her love. And that's it, that's all I'm going to say.
Hooray!